All right, so Ari Shaffir was just on Bert Kreischer's podcast for the first time since dosing him. And these two have done podcasts together since then. They've done Rogan's, but it's the first time he's been back on Bertcast since the episode where he drugged him. So most of the comments are talking about how they should finally release that episode, which hopefully Bert does, because that'd be pretty funny to see. Even this podcast was pretty entertaining because there are a couple times where Bert would be talking about basically everything wrong with podcasting and comedy by talking about himself, but as at least kind of in a self-aware way for once. And it was funny because Ari would use it as an example of what he basically hates in comedy. And he'd sound disgusted by it, but not like he's trying to insult Bert, more just he's giving his natural reaction and he's going to tell Bert like it is. I mean, at one point, Bert was talking about how earlier that morning he was thinking about filming a workout video to upload to Instagram, but then he started thinking about it and is like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm not a fitness influencer. And Ari's basically like, well, you're just desperate for content and likes. And it sounds like Bert kind of agrees. And then he also goes on to talk about how one of his friends passed away recently, and his first thought was to post on social media about it. But then again, he's like, what am I doing? Like, why would I do that? And then Ari just starts ranting about how comedians post way too much personal stuff to social media. And by the end of it, he just sounds fed up. And he's like, there's a sickness in our field.
This morning I was in the gym and I'd partied last night and I was going to do a video of me, hey, and then I was like, what am I doing? Like, what? I'm not a fitness
There's nothing
influencer.
in here.
There was a time.
You're just sick for content and likes. It's just like, I may as well do something.
Well, that's the whole, when we get back to that whole performative thing, my buddy just passed away. And I was like, oh, I should post it. Why am I posting?
Why are you posting?
Why am I
I heard that
posting?
guy. My thoughts go out to his family. Like, that's not,
Yeah.
Why do you got to go public with that? You see people like posting their ring and they're getting engaged. I'm like, why are you including strangers in this deeply personal moment? There's a sickness. There's a sickness in our field.
And you can tell Ari's disgusted by a lot of the stuff going on in comedy, which is obviously ironic coming from him. I mean, I wish this was somebody else saying this, but Ari Shaffir is actually making some good points. Again, this is actually the second video I've made in, I think, a week where Ari's made some sense. I mean, also during this podcast, Ari kind of takes some indirect shots at Tom Segura. And again, I'm sure he's thinking of a bunch of different comedians, but Tom definitely fits the description here. Like Bert brings up how in rap music, it's cool to talk about how much money you have and the cars you have, but in comedy, it's like the opposite. And he asks Ari why that is. And Ari explains it to him and then talks about how disgusted he is when comedians do that.
Jay-Z has a lyric, what's 50 grand to a motherfucker like me? Can you please remind me? It's such a badass lyric. But then you go, that's so disconnecting. Why is it popular? Why does
they're based in braggadociousness, and comedy's not supposed. So when they're like, I fly private jets, I fly my Maserati, look at my Lamborghini, it's like it goes with this like bravado thing. And with us, it's not supposed to be there. So it's disconcerting and it's a bit gross. We're supposed to be self-deprecating, and then everyone's coming out like doing these big things and like private jets. And you and Joe Coy made the joke of like, well, now the joke is I'm actually bragging. And then everyone else just caught up and actually just really bragged. And then there is no joke. It's just bragging. And it's just gross for what we do.
Yeah, and that's definitely what happened to Tom. At first he was trying to act like he was doing it just as a bit, but then after a while it just turned into actual bragging and just talking about that stuff way too much, which like Ari said, just doesn't work in comedy. But another example of an industry where you can do that stuff and you kind of have to do it, and something I thought Tom was maybe kind of trying to get into, is the whole motivational alpha male red pill content. Like with that, you need to be showing off your cars and money. Like if Andrew Tate didn't have money, he would never have been anywhere close to how famous he is now. So that's why I think for a little, it seemed like Tom was heading in that direction, telling his fans that they're losers, that they need to get their shit together and they need to stop being so bitter and jealous. Andrew Tate was already doing the same thing and would call people brokies, and Tom would call his fans pores. Also, Tom was one of the first people to have on Andrew Tate before he even blew up. And it seemed like Tom loved that podcast, so I'm sure he was inspired a little bit by him and thought he could pull that off. The difference is, though, Andrew Tate gained his fame by being arrogant and self-obsessed and showing off his lifestyle. But Tom, on the other hand, it's like the opposite. He gained his fame being a self-deprecating comedian. So him getting mad at the pores and trying to act like he's better than them just doesn't work. And it's way too serious. He was never very funny trying to do that stuff. Like at least Andrew Tate, some of his stuff was kind of funny. But Tom, he just couldn't pull it off. And I think he realizes that now. He's definitely cut back on it. And it's funny because I know Ari just started a new podcast under YMH Studios, so I don't think he's really trying to take a shot at Tom when he's talking about this, but he kind of did. And I'd imagine Bert was probably thinking of Tom when he brought this subject up. So also during this podcast, there's some classic Bert moments, like where he would ask a question just because, he wanted to answer it himself and try to turn it into a therapy session.
Why did you get back into podcast?
I found something I wanted to work on. Found something I wanted to do.
Tell me about when it got exhausting to you. Because I'm going to tell you what I'm going through. And I know what you're going to say.
Yeah.
I had a few moments in life where I didn't know, I felt everything was performative.
Uh-huh.
Everything was performative.
Yeah.
The other day at the 5K, a girl blew out her knee.
And you were like, turn the cameras on, let's help her.
But I went to sit with her to hold her hand. And I had a voice in my head go, I wonder if anyone's filming this. And I went, what the fuck?
What's wrong with me?
Yeah, what's wrong with me? Like, where's my head at?
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want that anymore. Like, I really don't want it.
And I think Bert is trying to say he doesn't want to be the center of attention for once in his life, which is hard to believe. He's saying that, but I doubt it. Even though he is in a weird position where pretty much everything he does is recorded and he's going like 24/7, which he chooses to do, but obviously you're going to get burnt out doing that. I mean, Ari said that's kind of one of the reasons why he stopped doing podcasts for a while, because he just needed a break from being recorded.
That was one of the things I wanted when I stopped Skeptic Tank. I was like, I haven't been not recorded for a full week in a long time.
And Bert might be exaggerating here, but he admits that about 90% of the conversations he's had with Joe Rogan have been on podcasts, which is pretty crazy. And again, this is something that Ari just sounds disgusted by.
Tom and I. You guys
are celebrities now. There's a good chance somebody's videotaping you wherever you go.
Thinking the other day, I was like, I called Joe. I've talked to Joe if you crammed all the hours I've spent talking to Joe, 90% of them were recorded.
Damn.
I remember one time I was on the phone with him, we were talking something, and he goes, you know what, stop, let's just come over, we'll do a podcast. This is a good conversation.
Yeah, we can like commodify this conversation.
Yeah, Rogan was probably thinking, if I'm stuck talking to Bert Kreischer, I better be getting paid for it. No, but I mean, it's crazy that these two are good friends, but the vast majority of their conversations have been on a podcast. Because as much as Rogan acts like it's just a genuine conversation they're having, obviously, if you're on a podcast, it's not going to be completely authentic. Like, people are going to act different if they know they're being recorded. And I bet a lot of comedians' relationships are like this. They only really interact on podcasts. I mean, Bert and Tom, for example, he says their whole relationship now is just on air. Like, that's the only time they really talk to each other. And if they talk off air, it's just about business. And Bert's been complaining about this for a while now, how Tom never hangs out with him off air. But I guarantee even if they were to do that, Bert would still be trying to take pictures or videos to upload to Instagram. And I remember one of the times he asked Tom to hang out. He wanted him to meet him at a college football game, which obviously Bert is just going to be partying the whole time and trying to be the center of attention, and everybody's going to be hanging around him. So I don't know if that's the best time for them to hang out. It'd probably be like when they went to Vegas. The whole time him and Tom are promoting Porosos, like going on shows, taking pictures and videos, crashing shows. It's just turning into a whole like media tour. It can never just be them chilling, taking it easy, just enjoying life. Like, there always has to be a business aspect to it. And Bert always has to be the center of attention. Him walking around Vegas, obviously people are going to be running up to him. He's going to be pounding beer with people. He's going to be partying. There's no way you can really hang out with him in that environment.
That's what it is, I guess.
Me and Tom's relationship is entirely recorded.
Yeah.
Our friendship is always like,
Don't you find that odd?
Just recently started finding it odd. Like, I
realized. You miss to find out who you are?
When we started the company, we started talking more about business stuff. And then I realized we haven't really hung.
Yeah.
And
I wrote you guys the other day. You didn't text me back. If we're just going on a hike or
no, if we're going to be very honest, Tom gets exhausted very easily.
I know, that's why we should go do a hike.
And
So I wonder if Bert will actually cut down on doing podcasts at all, because he complains about all this stuff and he's like, oh, it's getting to be too much. It's exhausting. But he's the one that chooses to go on every podcast out there and do like 3 podcasts a week of his own and upload all these videos and promo for his tours and stuff. And I mean, he's complaining about all this on a podcast. So, I mean, I don't know if he could ever really give it up. But let me know what you guys think. And then make sure to check out my Patreon account if you want to hear about the time Tim Dillon humbled Whitney Cummings, or the degeneracy of Ari Shaffir, or how David Lucas is trying too hard to be an edgy comedian and it's starting to backfire a little bit. And there's just a ton of other stuff. There are over 80 videos and most of them are over 20 minutes. So if you're interested, I'll put a link in the description.